everybody, how's it going? Welcome to the inaugural episode of a new podcast series we're doing here called Entertainment Annotated. Now, for those that are unfamiliar with what this show is all about, basically the new podcast lineup, if you will, from H Entertainment, we're kind of doing it a little more specialized, a little more niche, if you will. So pretty much each podcast we're doing is going to be focused on a different, niche. So we have our Marvel Annotated podcast, DC Annotated podcast, Sci-Fi Annotated podcast, and this one is Entertainment Annotated, talking about film, TV industry news, trends, box office reports, tech updates, so on and so on. So for this kickoff into this new podcast series, I could not think of a better person to start off with than Brandon Katz. And I'm just going to turn over to you. People can, tell people where to find your work at, and yeah, I'm just going to be quiet now.
Well, thank you for having me on, Josh. I much appreciate it. Thank you for hyping me up as well. If you could tell all my potential matches on Bumble and Hinge the same things, that would go really a long way. Would really appreciate that. So I am the senior entertainment reporter for Observer. You can follow me on Twitter at @great_Catsby, and I specialize in the film and television industry, and that ranges all sorts of things. That could be, Rotten Tomatoes, film and TV reviews. That can be the industry behind the business, the X's and O's and the dollar signs. I have kind of an eclectic sphere of focus. And today I'm really excited to kind of hop into some of those behind the scenes business angles that the average fan is going to be fascinated to learn about and might not know already.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's really interesting right now from, what this podcast is about, right? Not really focusing on the superhero movies or, the Star Warses of the world. I mean, just really kind of talking more about the industry behind all of that, not surface level stuff, but, the things that usually are kind of like the hooks and the bait, so to speak. Like, we're focusing more on the line. It's like a fishing analogy. I hope that makes sense. But yeah, so today what we're talking about, for those listening to this on audio-only devices like Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, you'll hear the entire audio, not split up, nothing like that. But if you're listening to this on YouTube, more likely than not, you're catching this in segments that are uploaded. So, check out all the other segments if you get a chance. On the YouTube visual, you'll see all the topics. So just if it's not uploaded yet, just come back later. I think they'll be uploaded about an hour, 2 hours apart on the day they're uploaded. So just, give some patience, come back later. Or check out the entire audio thing, because we have some really great topics here. The first one is talking about I always want to say fandom, because I thought it was DC fandom initially, but I was corrected. It's fandom. Because I guess it plays into the whole thematic thing they had going on with all the heroes and stuff.
They wanted to make it seem like, this kind of coliseum, which cool, great branding, but my brain is like fandom.
Exactly. Yeah, and I felt so stupid when I finally caught on, like there is an E at the end. Like that's a thing. But yeah, we're going to talk about, that whole event and focus more on kind of just how the future of expos going forward, the kind of legacy this could have. The second one, we're talking about movie theaters reopening, which is definitely, I actually just had my roommate before we were recording ask me like, hey, so when are we going to go see Tenet? And I was like, let's pause that for a second. We can come back to that conversation later about Tenet, but I know New Mutants is out as well. And then the third topic we have here is talking about, the growing trend of scripted podcasts. And then for our final topic for this episode, we're talking about this really cool new cloud tech that was unveiled for film studios to use to do productions. And I mean, I think it's a great case of innovation during this time, that announcement.
Desperate. We're just...
Yeah, it's there. But getting into the third topic, there's actually a growing trend in the industry that I think is really interesting, which is podcasts. But not just any podcast, scripted podcasts. And lately there is actually news, Kiersey Clemons, who may or may not still be Iris West in The Flash. I don't know technically anymore, but she was cast a star in a horror podcast. It's called Ghost Tape. And basically it follows a new Army recruit on a Texas base. And it's featuring also as a part of the masterminds behind it, Nia DaCosta, who's the Candyman director. Not Jordan Peele. He's just a producer. People keep thinking he's directing that movie because of how they're marketing it. And then a writer from Lock and Key, Aaron Ali Kolaiti. I really hope I said the name right. But yeah, it's really cool. I think it's gonna be really interesting. It says Ghost Tape tells the story of what happens when Tessa Dixon, struggling with the psychological and physical trauma of basic training, discovers a tape of her grandfather's and unleashes a deadly manifestation of her family's horrible misdeeds. So that'll be really interesting. And then along the same time, I think actually literally the same day it was reported, Audible is also introducing an all-you-can-listen subscription plan, $7.95 called Audible Plus, which offers access to original content, podcasts, audiobooks. And then, of course, not too long ago, Spotify, I believe, announced a further push, because I know they gave Joe Rogan a podcast, they gave Amy Schumer a podcast, Joe Budden has a podcast on there, but they're like feuding right now, which they're going to lose that battle. But yeah, it's the whole scripted podcast game in general, but definitely scripted podcasts. It's becoming a market. Well, it was a market, but it's becoming a huge market. So yeah, what do you think about that? That kind of development in entertainment?
Throughout Hollywood history, the advent of new platforms and new technologies has always led to new innovations and storytelling capabilities. I think this is yet another chapter in what we've seen since the dawn of cinema. More recently speaking, I remember in 2010 when ABC made the groundbreaking decision to option a Twitter account, Shit My Dad Says, into its own pilot and kind of build a story around that humorous content that was more retrofitted for TV. And then this is just an extension of that. We are finding new ways to develop scripted content and deliver it to a hungry audience. Each and every year for the last 5-6 years, the number of scripted television series has surpassed and set the record of the year before, which is just a hugely indicative of the proliferation of streaming services and our insatiable hunger for content. And now we are seeing new lanes and new formats and new platforms emerge as viable business for Hollywood studios to generate revenue and entertain audiences. So I'm not surprised that scripted podcast content is rising in popularity. I'm not surprised that bigger and bigger stars are starting to get involved. And I expect this to kind of continue growing, just like we've seen TikTok stars and YouTube stars and Twitch and live streaming stars kind of grow their platforms and become bigger brands and personalities in their own right through multimedia expansion. So this is part of the course for all of Hollywood. And if you love podcasts, it's a great time. It's the podcast boom. And I'm sure everyone is going to find something that they can kind of hold on to and say, this is entertaining content that I'm going to keep coming back to. It's the intersection between commerce and creativity. That's how I always see it.
Yeah, I just find it, I think it's so interesting because I know some of the comic book companies have done it too. I know Marvel did like a scripted, or at least they announced a scripted podcast for like Wolverine or something. And
there's a big hubbub about the Sandman live kind of reading and Audible podcast series. Yeah.
Yeah, so I find it really interesting how this market, and I think for the podcast market especially, the biggest thing I noticed to really signify it's finally really emerging, right, as like a real, like a take it seriously real staple, outside of the fact that like a lot of new podcasts are popping up all the time, including this one, I guess, technically. But with the fact that
bad boy.
Yeah, we're gonna take over the market share. But I find it really interesting how they have now started, like on Spotify and other places, dividing podcasts into actual kind of like pockets, like they do with music. It used to be just top podcasts and that's it. But now they're literally putting top, let's say, hip hop podcast or top horror podcast or top news podcast. And it's like, I find this evolution of the podcast industry really entertaining to listen to, but also really interesting just to see that maturation. And then with the scripted podcast joining it as well, I'm really wondering, like, are we going to enter an era of television, right, where we get eventually, just like with 3D, where it's not like a gimmick kind of thing, but they start doing something along the lines of, like, let's say you have one show and they offer it in like 3 different ways. You have like the podcast version of the show, you have the regular, like you would on TV show, and then maybe like with how interesting binge watching, or not interesting, but how big binge watching has become too, you have, let's say, like the binge version of the show, more like a movie, I guess. But I'm just really interested in seeing, like, are we going to get to that kind of point? Because I already know they do, like, I don't know, you're watching Lovecraft Country, correct?
Yes.
So I can't wait to watch it tonight. But
Tonight's episode, just for fans listening, is probably my favorite of the first 5 that I've seen.
yeah, it's just, I read the book in anticipation, so like, I'm really like liking this. Yeah, I'm in it. But like with that, right, I find it really interesting how you finish Lovecraft Country and immediately right after, and I not only did this with like tons of other shows in the past, like The Walking Dead, but they have like a complimentary podcast that they advertise. So I'm just interested in seeing like do you think, like, where do you think this evolution is going to go at a certain point? Because they've always had radio shows, like scripted radio shows, it's always been a thing, but it really feels different this time in terms of how it's being so aggressively approached.
Yeah, I think the expansion is huge, and it's going to continue. I think it's going to be especially prevalent in the near future for major IP. We already see that to a degree. So, for example, HBO Max has a Dune spin-off show, which will be set in the world of Denis Villeneuve's upcoming Warner Brothers blockbuster. They have a Gotham set series about the Gotham PD that's set in the world of the Batman. So those are already spin-offs of larger brands on a new medium. Why not take that a step further and have a kind of street-level, minimalistic, very restrained, Batman podcast where it's told from the perspective of, one junkie, one kid, one person, I don't know, but it's a small contained story set within that universe that is complementary content. You can do that for Dune. You can do that for whatever the major IP is that you have, and just create smaller stories. So, the Marvel-verse has their blockbusters. They have their TV counterparts. Why not extend that even further and have podcasts set in that world? Maybe some familiar characters pop up, maybe not. But it is just yet another platform with which you can leverage and ping pong characters and storylines with your bigger, more kind of bombastic blockbuster mediums. It shoots interest and engagement back and forth, and it's another potential revenue stream for studios to take advantage of. So I would not be surprised to see that rise in popularity and usage in the near future for major IP brands.
Yeah, literally, as you said that, I thought of like, what would be a great if DC, again, Warner Brothers, DC execs, you're listening, hit us up. Ideas. These are ideas.
Gotcha.
Ideas are free. How to make the ideas real. Now, that has a price. But
good businessman, Josh. I like it. I'll ride your coattails any day, my friend.
For the Batman, though, you made a great point. That would be a perfect one because they're already doing the Gotham cop show, right? But a great podcast you could do that connects to both the movie, the Batman, and the, Gotham City Police Department focused show, which we all thought Gotham was going to be originally, but whatever.
Like, I would love to see one citizen of Gotham on their one night have a random run-in with Batman. And that could be its own self-contained anthology podcast. Like, I would listen to that. Like, 3 hours of like, holy crap, I just had the craziest night of my life. And it's kind of the seedlings of like, there's something out there, especially set in the year 2 universe of the Batman. It's this kind of cool early on interaction between a Gotham citizen and what will become the defining character of this city. So there's a million different directions you can go with it. But the idea is expanding the brand across platforms, taking advantage of all the money-making opportunities, and engaging fans on multiple levels.
Yeah, I mean, I would do probably like a year 1 thing, and I would have like the narrative set be basically like, probably not Commissioner Gordon or Lieutenant Gordon. I can't remember exactly where he's starting off at in the Batman movie, what ranking. Probably not him. I'd probably have like another, like a detective or something like that. Maybe if you want to do an Easter egg, like Jim Corrigan, aka the Spectre, I don't know. But you could do like the detective investigating these early year 1 Batman sightings. And you know how like, they show it all the time in police shows, but they do like the tape recording. And they record your testimony, so to speak, or your victim statement or witness statement. That could be the entire podcast. Just being like, yeah, just like, for all the hip hop fans out there, it's fire when Lil Wayne starts with the lighter. The lighter flicks, you're like, all right, I'm not pausing anything. This is what I'm listening to for the next 3
I like that. That's some Carter No Ceilings references. I like that.
Exactly. Just like that happens, it'd be really cool if you start the episode, right? Have your theme songs, whatever appear, but you start the episode, you hear the tape recording button being pushed or whatever, and then you hear the guy and he's someone introducing, I guess, the witness that's about to give the witness statement, and then going from there, and you're hearing from these people, like you said, like from these people's perspectives, like this crazy thing they just saw, like this, first signing of Batman, second signing of Batman, like, or from a criminal's perspective, like, what it's like to be doing, let's say, like a drug dealer, a weapons exchange, right? And then all of a sudden, Batman shows up, and like, this is Robert Pattinson Batman. So, and if in year 2, he's as brutal as he appeared to be in that one scene, I can't imagine what he's like year 1. When he's really probably the adrenaline's pumping, he's really just getting into it for the first time. I mean, it'd be kind of funny, hear like the hospital beeper in the background, like, this guy's just in the hospital, broken everything. He's like, I just got attacked by like a demon, and like, that'd be a really cool, I think, podcast if they do it. I actually have some contacts at WB. Maybe I should.
There we go. That's no wood burning up here. I like it.
Yeah, no, I mean, but I just think it'd be a great opportunity to take advantage of that medium.
Like you said, there's this huge explosion going on now where talent is coming to that platform, and I just think we're going to continue to see that grow, expand, and innovate.
Yeah. Now, in the spirit of scripted podcasting, especially in the way we just kind of like spitballed, like, ideas out for something. If, let's say, you were approached, it could be any studio. You were approached, they said, hey, we want to take advantage of this medium. We think you have a great approach to it. What would you develop as a scripted podcast series?
That's a great question. There is a property, a piece of IP that has yet to be developed into a TV show, a movie, anything. And I think it's so ripe for today's day and age, and so ripe for the fans of genre, which has become kind of the dominant form of mass-produced entertainment. And that is Lucifer's Hammer. It's a book from the 1970s that takes place before, during, and after a comet ends essentially all life on Earth. And there's just these little pockets of survival. We obviously have had a lot of post-apocalyptic content in the last 10, 20 years, but I do think there's a reason we keep returning to that genre. It has an inherent fascination and holds both our fear and our hopes for what humanity can be, will be, etc. And this is a specific story that covers a lot of ground on both sides of the moral fence. We get to know our quote-unquote bad guys and our good guys. We get to know how people grow and change throughout this traumatic, world-altering event and kind of become the people maybe they were always destined to be, or shrink away from the opportunity to help and provide goodness in the world and kind of give in to their baser instincts. And it's a really beautiful, entertaining, phenomenal story. It would need to be updated, obviously, for kind of modern audiences, but this is a piece of IP that I have loved so much that I've even inquired about trying to acquire it myself to turn it into something. Unfortunately, that never panned out. But yeah, Lucifer's Hammer, book from the 70s, highly recommend it. Great page turner that I think in some form would be a great story told today.
Yeah. No, I think, I'm going to
add it to the reading list, man. Trust me, it's a good one.
Yeah, I'm going to have to check it out.
All these 1970s references that now seem hilarious to us here in 2020.
Yeah. I mean, I always thought would be an interesting scripted series is I don't know if you ever read it, but Marcus Aurelius, he has his like, I guess you would call them meditations maybe, but it's literally just like his diary pretty much that people took and were like, man, he's saying, this dude's spitting fire. Like, kind of like that kind of moment back in the day. That'd be a good podcast actually, on a philosophical note, but because I've been reading a lot during this pandemic, so it's what I just got into recently. But I think for like a scripted show outside of the Batman things, I think it's actually a really stellar idea. And, I'm actually going to try seeing if I, get some traction on that.
Keep it posted. We'll have a post-podcast meeting.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. And I think I think another really a good series that's not being touched right now that I feel like has so much potential is the John Carter series. I think it's definitely a series I would love to see done again on, I want to say film, but really more TV series. I think it would be a great TV series. Um, but at the same time, I think you could do a lot of great work in a podcast because, if you're able to really deliver on the audio side of things and um, describe the world enough to really let people visually put it together in their heads. If you want to do a thing, I know some people do this with podcasts. They like close their eyes while they listen to them and really try to envision this world. I was reading that stuff. So that's what someone does in terms of approaching it. I don't know how they don't fall asleep, but that's what they do. And John Carter would be the perfect kind of scripted podcast series to do that because, have you read the book?
I've not read the book, but I think one of the inherent appeals of novels and what you're saying with podcasts is that the power of our imagination can never really be matched by something that's put on the screen. Our interpretation and how we view it and imagine it, especially without any filters or outside forces influencing us, it's kind of entertainment in its purest form. So I agree that describing this world in this visual language while letting the viewer or listener or reader make their own kind of conclusions, it's a beautiful thing in terms of storytelling.
Yeah, especially if you just provide the professional level audio side of it, not just narration, but like, for example, if John Carter is jumping in the air, right, and they're describing it from his point of view, like it'd be cool to hear the wind, as he's jumping and to hear like the sound of like, yes, his foot hitting the ground, as he then, it's like if you really deliver that, basically everything but that visual component, I think something like Dune would fit into this too. But, a lot of these sci-fi franchises, I think it would just like blow people away. Because like you said, the imagination just kind of takes it over. And yeah, that's kind of, that, I think a scripted podcast, that's kind of really where it can go, very similar to what you can do with a book in your imagination, but at the same time, just kind of to like a next dimension, so to speak. And it might, like for people like myself, right? Sometimes I'll read something and I'll end up, if I say it later, like mispronouncing the name I was reading, like of characters, which happens all the time, unfortunately, to me. But like, it'd be a great way to listen and like, experience that story, so to speak, and not have to worry after the fact, like, hey, I'm saying this person's name wrong, though. Like Aragon, right? When I read Aragon, that series, I said the dragon, I think it's Saphira is the dragon's name. The whole time I was saying Sapphira. And I was talking to someone about the book, and they're like, who are you talking about? Like,
They set
and I
you
was
straight.
like, yeah, it set me straight. I was just like, oh my God, like this, thousands of pages, I've just been reading wrong. But getting into the last topic we have here, and Brandon, you've been great this whole podcast so far. I know we're kind of going over, so thank you.
Like I told you, man, you're a great hype man.
I'm trying to keep the energy going. So Universal actually and Microsoft have partnered up to develop a new cloud-based animation and live action production processes, as they put it. I made it sound like it was going to be singular for a second, but plural. And it's being designed for use on Universal and DreamWorks animation productions. And the full thing here, I'm not going to say who it's from because it's not from The Observer.
All good, man.
But
we're all together as media.
Yeah, it's not. It was a deadline. I think they don't credit people, but don't worry. That's it for the episode 1 of Entertainment Annotated. For those that are listening all the way through, thank you very much. Greatly appreciated. Please provide feedback. I know my audio is not going to sound. Your audio sounds great, but I know my audio probably won't be up to the standard I usually would want it to, just because my mic decided to act fugly right before this. But hopefully for future episodes of this podcast and other podcasts on HNE, that could be remediated. And Brandon, thank you again for being on it. I appreciate you being on the inaugural episode. I feel like there's only certain viewpoints for people in the industry such as yourself that could be shared, especially when it comes to things that aren't just like superhero movies and stuff like that. So I really appreciate you being on the episode.
Thank you for having me, good sir. Always a pleasure.
Yeah. And where, for people that may have forgotten, from our conversation, where can they find you?
So I'm a senior entertainment reporter at observer.com. You can follow me on Twitter at great_Katsby. I tweet all about, the superhero movies, the Oscar races, box office, TV ratings, basically everything the industry covers. I got at least a foot or a toe in.
Nice. Yeah, and everyone, I definitely recommend you guys check out his work. Don't be like me and be super confused and be like Observer. That sounds familiar. Yes, it does come from New York Observer. But yeah, it's great. It's great work, and definitely support it. I like supporting other. Like H&E, right? Like we're leaving. This is actually a spoiler technically for you because we haven't publicly announced it yet. I think we're doing it on Monday, but we're leaving small form journalism.
Oh wow!
And we're going just to long form content, which the podcast is a part of. But yeah, so I definitely, if you guys like small form journalism or it's more short form journalism, not just the long form stuff, check out places like The Observer, even though I know you write long form content. So it's not like you do just short form.
No, yeah, a lot of great long form. Heading into Tenet, we actually launched a new series, Nolan Time, which
yes,
really focuses on how we watch the clock in Christopher Nolan's movies and his fascination with time and all of its delineations and permutations. And we have some really, really cool stuff that tracks kind of the history of his career. I think fans are really going to dig it, especially as they prepare for Tenet.
Yeah, and what I'll do is, I'm already gonna put your social media, like your Twitter handle and everything, and observer.com / your user profile, so people can just immediately access your written articles. But I'm gonna put all that in the description for those listening, whether it's on YouTube or Apple Podcasts, wherever. But also, I'll make sure, definitely on YouTube at least, in the comment section, to make it like a pinned comment. I'll put the Tenet thing, or the Christopher Nolan series that you've been working on. So people can check it out. Definitely everyone, you'll enjoy reading it, and
I hope
especially if you're a fan of Nolan, you'll like it. But also, if I'm not mistaken, you did a breakdown, right, for the Batman?
I did a breakdown of kind of my reaction and the influences and homages I noticed in the trailer, and kind of what that represents for this new film and this new universe moving ahead. Yeah,
and I'll also share that as well. So people just immediately check out like a bunch of the things you did that we kind of talked about. So we talked about Batman, and yeah, thanks for being on the episode. And yeah, everyone leave comments down below what you guys think. Do you like this new series after one episode? And we'll check you guys later.